Cave Rescue. On December 27, 2003, a group of 8 boys and 2 counselors set out for Boy Scout Cave in Florida. Among them were 15-year-old Michael Shiro and 16-year-old Javik Henderson, both eager for adventure. The cave was known for its narrow crawlways and sharp turns, but it was considered safe due to its stable structure. Their counselors were unable to navigate the tight passages due to their size, which is why they decided to stay outside, leaving the boys to explore. The cave's air was cool, and the light from 9 flashlights flickered through the dark passages. The group crawled deeper into the cave, undeterred by the oppressive silence that surrounded them. After about an hour, they reached a particularly difficult section known as the hairpin curve. The narrow passage twisted at a sharp angle, barely wide enough for one person to crawl through. Michael, determined to lead, pressed forward, followed by Henderson. But as Henderson tried to maneuver around the sharp bend, he became stuck, unable to move forward or back. Panic set in as his breathing quickened, realizing he was trapped. Michael crawled back to help, but as he wedged himself into the narrow space, the walls of the cave scraped against their skin, making it harder to move. The group, waiting in the wider section of the cave, grew anxious. For over an hour, the two struggled. Henderson's body twisted painfully in the tight passage, and sharp edges of the rock dug into his ribs and hips. Each attempt to move only seemed to make things worse. As time passed, the situation grew dire. Then, disaster struck. Michael, exhausted and cold, collapsed. Henderson was left in the dark, unable to help his friend. His cries for help echoed in the cave, but the other boys, too afraid to approach, could only panic and watch helplessly. Outside, the counselors were still unaware of the crisis unfolding inside. It wasn't until the boys made their way back to the entrance, frantic and out of breath, that they finally explained what had happened. The counselors immediately extinguished the fire they had lit and called 911. Rescue teams arrived quickly, equipped with tools and experience. Inside the cave, the air was thick with fear. The boys, pale and trembling, huddled together, unable to comprehend the gravity of their situation. The rescuers, understanding the risks of hypothermia and oxygen depletion, moved swiftly to reach Michael and Henderson. When the rescue team reached the hairpin curve, the sight was grim. Henderson was still conscious, but his movements were sluggish and his skin clammy. Michael, however, lay slumped just ahead, unresponsive and cold to the touch. The rescuers worked methodically, chiseling away at the limestone first to widen the narrow passage. Each strike echoed through the cave, adding to the tension. It took over an hour to free Henderson. As he was pulled from the hairpin curve, he let out a sob of relief, though his body remained stiff and trembling. The rescuers wrapped him in a thermal blanket and dragged him through the narrow passages towards the surface. With Henderson's save, attention turned to Michael, who was still in an unconscious state. After 2 hours of grueling work, they freed Michael. His pulse was weak, but it was there. They carefully secured him in a harness and began the painstaking process of carrying him to the surface. As they emerged into the daylight, emergency medical teams rushed to stabilize the boys. Michael, still unconscious, was quickly treated for hypothermia. It took him an entire day to regain consciousness, but miraculously, he survived. Red Knoll's Cave Rescue. It was December 21, 1997, a chilly evening in Arizona, when 5 young men, Brandon Silverhorn, Christopher Reed, Gus Hansen, John Salazar, and Jeremy Platt, set out for the Safford Shafts, a desolate area also known as Red Knolls. This wasn't your typical hangout spot. The landscape was pockmarked with deep pits, some plunging 40 to 60 feet into the hardened bed of what was once an ancient lake. One of the pits was capped by a 4-foot-thick rock covering 60 feet of silt. It was a strange setting for a night of adventure, but that's exactly what they were seeking. They arrived around 9 p.m., armed with gasoline and reckless excitement. In the midst of steep drops and towering cliffs, their attention was drawn to a narrow crack in the rock, barely a foot wide. The plan: to turn this crack into a fire-spewing spectacle, without hesitance. Then, one of them lit a rag, tossed it in, and stepped back. For a moment, silence.